Okay, let's unpack this. Forget trading, 8 hours of your day for a paycheck. Imagine a future, perhaps closer than we think, say 2040, where your income isn't primarily linked to a job, but to, well, ownership.
It sounds like a pretty radical shift, right?
Yeah.
But the article we're diving into today argues this isn't some far-off utopian dream. It argues it's more of a practical outcome driven by economic forces already in motion.
Exactly. This deep dive is based on a fascinating article. It presents a really bold vision for the economy by 2040. And the title lays it out pretty clearly. The Future of Wealth, Post-Labor Economics and the 16 Income Streams of 2040.
Yeah, so our mission today is to really get inside this vision, to understand the core ideas, the why and the how, and look at the surprising details, especially how income could fundamentally work differently for you in this future, regardless of traditional employment.
Okay, so if we cut right to the core of this article's argument, so what's the fundamental shift it predicts? How will most people earn a living, according to this?
Well, the central thesis is that traditional wages, income earned by trading your time and labor, they're projected to decline significantly, particularly between now and 2040. And the source attributes this decline primarily to the accelerating capabilities of AI and automation.
Okay.
So by 2040, the article predicts that for many, maybe even most, individuals, the dominant source of income will actually be ownership income.
Ownership income. So income isn't coming from what you do, like your job, but from what you own.
Precisely. That's the idea. The article labels this future state as post-labor economics. It's basically an economic model where property income, that is, income derived from owning assets that generate value, becomes the main driver of individual wealth.
That's a significant departure from how most economies function today. What's the driving force behind this predicted shift? I mean, why would labor income decline so much, and why would ownership income rise so dramatically?
Technology, mainly. The article points to technology as the primary catalyst.
Yeah.
AI and robotic systems are just improving exponentially. They offer businesses the ability to perform tasks faster, cheaper, more consistently, and at a greater scale than human labor in many areas. The economic incentive for corporations to automate is simply, well, it's immense.
Which leads to fewer traditional jobs, I guess, or maybe reduced wages for the jobs that remain.
Right. And this creates a fundamental economic challenge. If a large chunk of the population isn't earning traditional wages, who buys the stuff? Who buys the products and services being produced by this increasingly automated economy?
The demand side.
Exactly. The article argues that for the system to survive and for businesses to keep making profits, they must ensure people have purchasing power. So, distributing ownership and therefore income from the automated systems and assets themselves becomes almost an economic necessity. It's a way to recirculate wealth and maintain demand.
So it's less about some philosophical choice, like let's all share, and more about just economic survival for corporations in a highly automated world.
That's the perspective presented in the article, yeah. It's framed as a practical adaptation to technological change.
Okay, so the why is automation creating this economic imperative. How does this shift from labor to widespread ownership income actually work in practice? What enables it on a mass scale?
The article highlights three main enabling factors. Think of them as sort of revolutions that are already underway or developing rapidly. First, there's distributed ownership technology.
Okay.
Think of it as making fractional ownership of almost anything incredibly easy and widespread. It's not just owning shares in a public company like Apple or something. It's the ability to own tiny pieces of private companies, land, infrastructure, or even digital assets like data.
So I don't need to be super wealthy to own a slice of something valuable. Makes sense. What's the second factor?
The second is passive accumulation systems. The idea here is that the income generated from all these diverse ownership stakes just flows automatically. Dividends, royalties, whatever form it takes, it just accumulates in your account without you needing to actively manage investments or, day trade. The system handles the compounding and distribution.
That's crucial for the passive idea. And the third enabler?
The third one is stackable income streams. So instead of relying on one large income stream from a single job, this future envisions individuals earning from multiple, often smaller, sources of ownership income. The real power is in stacking many of these streams together to form a substantial overall income.
Stacking makes it seems less vulnerable than relying on just one employer, right? Now, the article gets quite specific. It mentions 16 different types of these ownership-based income streams. And it makes a point that these aren't just like theoretical. They're based on mechanisms already functional in parts of the U.S. today.
Yes, and that's one of the most intriguing aspects, I think. The article isn't proposing building a completely new system from scratch. It's identifying existing models for distributing wealth and ownership and suggesting how they could be scaled up and integrated.
Okay, can you give us a flavor of some of these streams? What are a few examples from that list that show the range of what the article is talking about?
Certainly. The list includes things like membership foundation dividends. This is pretty similar to how credit unions already distribute profits back to their members.
Right, I get those.
Or patron equity kickers. Conceptually, it's like REI's member dividends, but imagine it automated and applied much more broadly across various businesses you might shop at or buy from.
So you're benefiting from systems you already interact with just by being a customer or member.
Exactly. Then there are models focused on broader participation, things like employee stock ownership plans, ESOPs, which, exist today, or multi-stakeholder co-ops where various participants, workers, customers, community members can all earn equity.
What about assets that aren't just traditional businesses? The article mentioned things like land and data, didn't it?
Yes, and that's where it gets really interesting, maybe less intuitive from Tatu's perspective. The list includes community land trust rebates. This is where residents in areas with shared land ownership can benefit from increases in property value, even without outright owning the land individually.
Interesting.
Or carbon and ecosystem royalties. The idea is that individuals might earn income for participating in activities that improve environmental health or, say, sequester carbon.
Earning from environmental benefit. That's novel. And what about all the data we generate online?
Yeah, the article proposes personal data royalties. This is the idea that the vast amounts of data you generate, which is incredibly valuable for training AI and driving other economic activity, should actually generate income for you.
That feels long overdue for many people, I'd say. Any other standout examples that feel particularly new?
Well, there's compute spectrum co-op royalties. Here, individuals could potentially earn income related to the digital infrastructure, like broadband capacity or data centers located in their community or region.
Okay.
And another interesting one is network state tokens. This seems to link income streams to participation and value creation within online communities or digital networks.
Wow. So the 16 streams cover a really wide spectrum, don't they? From local land trusts to global digital networks, conventional business ownership, to totally new forms of value like data and environmental benefits.
That's precisely the idea, a diversified portfolio of passive income sources, all tied to various forms of ownership and participation in the broader economy.
How does the article illustrate what this would actually look like for a person living in this future? Gives an example, right? To make it more concrete.
It does, yeah. The scenario starts with an 18-year-old in, say, 2040. And the point is they don't necessarily need a specific job or a degree to start building economic security. Simply by being a resident and opening a bank account, they would instantly qualify for certain baseline income streams tied to broad ownership structures.
Instantly qualify, just by existing within the system.
Based on the article's projection, yes. Many streams are apparently tied to things like residency or citizenship in a network state, participation in local co-ops, or just generating data activities inherent to being a person in this envisioned 2040 economy. The scenario suggests they might start with a baseline, perhaps something equivalent to a universal basic income figure like $1,200 a month, plus an initial amount from property income, maybe starting around $3,000 per year initially.
Okay, so a baseline plus some starting ownership income. What happens as they get older in this scenario?
Well, by age 23, the article's model suggests this person could have accumulated maybe tens of thousands of dollars in asset ownership. And crucially, not necessarily through saving a wage they earned from a job, but through the passive accumulation and maybe automatic reinvestment from these growing streams.
And fast forward another decade, by 33.
By 33, through continued accumulation and the power of compounding these streams, they could potentially be earning a passive income figure higher than what many full-time workers earn today. The article throws out numbers suggesting potentially a six-figure income generated automatically through their ownership stakes.
A six-figure passive income by their mid-30s without needing a traditional career path. Wow, that really puts into perspective the scale of the shift the article is predicting.
It absolutely does. It fundamentally changes the relationship between individuals and economic value creation.
And how does all this complex flow of multiple income streams actually get managed for the individual? Does the article propose some complicated new crypto wallet system for every little type of income?
No, actually, and that's another key practical point the article makes. It leverages existing infrastructure. Banks are envisioned as playing the central role here.
The banks.
Yeah. They would handle the verification, confirming eligibility for different streams based on residency, participation, data generation, whatever it is. They'd manage the cash flow from the various sources, distribute the income directly into your standard bank account, handle the tax reporting, and even facilitate the inheritance of these ownership stakes.
So all these different streams, royalties, dividends, they just converge and simply appear as deposits in your familiar bank account.
That's the proposed efficiency. The complexity is managed behind the scenes by the banking system. The article suggests banks are already equipped to handle the majority of these operations, especially with modern instant payment systems like FedNow or RTP becoming more common.
That does make it sound far more grounded in reality than, building a whole new financial system from scratch.
And that's the core argument. It's presented not as some utopian fantasy, but as a practical, composable system. It uses existing banks, existing payment rails, and largely existing regulatory frameworks. The article states pretty clearly the components are mostly already here.
So if the tech, the infrastructure, and the basic mechanisms are functional or nearly functional, what's the missing piece? What's needed to make this vision a widespread reality?
According to the article, the primary missing links are public awareness and coordinated implementation. The pieces exist, but they need to be deliberately integrated, scaled up, and understood by the population and institutions for the full system to function broadly.
Right. And hopefully exploring these ideas like we are now helps a little with that awareness. So bringing it all together then, what's the ultimate takeaway the article wants us to grasp about this predicted 2040 economy? What's the big picture shift?
It's really about recognizing what the article sees as an inevitable transition and figuring out how to facilitate it smoothly. The shift is fundamental. From an economy driven by the scarcity of labor to one emphasizing individual sovereignty through widespread ownership.
Right.
From labor as the primary income source to ownership, and from an employer-centric model where your economic life revolves around a job, to a more bank-integrated system where income flows directly from your participation in the economy via owning value-generating assets.
And it frames this whole thing as a practical approach to addressing potentially massive societal challenges, right? Like unemployment and inequality brought on by automation, by essentially distributing the benefits of that automation through ownership.
Exactly. It's positioned as a way to adapt our economic framework for a future where human contribution perhaps shifts away from routine tasks, moving towards areas where we have a comparative advantage while ensuring everyone benefits from the productivity gains of technology.
Wow. Okay. So we've unpacked this vision of 2040. An economy where income flows from owning a piece of the action driven by automation, enabled by distributed ownership tech, passive systems, and stacked streams. All potentially managed through the familiar interface of your bank account, built on infrastructure we already have.
And crucially, based on mechanisms that are functioning in some form today, just perhaps waiting to be integrated into a more comprehensive system for broad wealth generation.
It certainly challenges our current assumptions about what work is and where money comes from.
And it suggests a potential path forward that tries to align technological progress with shared economic security. It's quite a thought experiment, if nothing else.
It really is. Okay, so for you, our listener, based on this deep dive into an economy where ownership becomes central, maybe something to ponder is, how might you start thinking differently today about value? What opportunities are there, even on a small scale, to participate in systems that generate value beyond just trading your time for money? And maybe even more fundamentally, if traditional jobs become less central, what does wealth truly mean in that future context? Definitely something to think about as the economic landscape continues to evolve around us.